grew and turned into you, and boof, you came out, and now all of a sudden these two people are your gods.
If you say, oh, you argued that poorly, well, it doesn't mean they're wrong.
Well, there's been multiple generations, at least in the US here, of rebels, like people who rebel against the system simply because it's the system.
That expectation, that culture of blind obedience still exists very much in a lot of corporate infrastructure. While I appreciate that, I don't know that that's necessarily like the most prudent way to weigh your allegiances when it comes to...
I have no allegiances, for one. Okay, welcome to yet another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we would love it. No, actually, we demand it. If you would like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, you'd better, or else.
Do it. I'm Casey Rochford, and I will be coming to your front door and folding my arms in a very sinister way with my bald head if you don't do what Eric says. So we also write our own music, and if you don't stick around to the end of the episode and then go buy the song at patreon.com/ksmvidcast, well, then I'll have to fold my arms a little tighter.
There will be consequences.
So what would you like to confabulate about tonight?
Well, sorry, I got to crack my knuckles in preparation for a beatdown. But we've had this topic kind of on the stack for a long time, and I think it'd be an interesting one to go into, and that is the idea. Well, this is a top, I guess we consider it philosophy. The idea of obedience.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot that comes from that, from the big stuff, like I was just following orders as kind of a cop out, or the idea that a military can't function efficiently if everyone doesn't just blindly do what they're told, and the happy medium between those two, like, well, if there is one. So yeah, that is an interesting and of course there's all kinds of examples in between there and outside the military too, but
I mean, you've got religion, you've got culture, societal obedience, the idea that you have to conform or behave according to
parental obedience.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I guess just to begin, the thing that I take issue with is what
subs and doms.
Subs and doms. Yeah, well, that's a whole now that's voluntary obedience, and that's okay. That can be a lot of fun. But I guess the thing that I take issue with the most is shit. I just lost what I was going to say now because you got me thinking about other stuff. Damn it! Oh man, like blind obedience. That's kind of what I was thinking. Like where you're not following the trend or following orders or whatever because it makes sense. You're doing it because you're told to, and you do it without question. And I think that's very dangerous. Like in any context, I can't actually imagine a context where that actually makes sense. But
yeah, I mean, so like the military uniform code of justice or something, uh, in the books says something to the effect of, you have a moral obligation to refuse any order that is immoral or something to that effect.
yeah,
Unethical maybe was the wording. I don't know. I'm not in the military, but I've read it before. I saw that excerpt and I was like, well, in practice, so I don't know how much that's really like a part of the culture in the military.
yeah, and that is a thing, is the culture, and this exists in the police force as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of enforcement arm of government, or anything for that matter. There's cultures where, the broski club essentially, and yeah, I get. I mean, it's good that at least they put that on paper, that is what's expected, that soldiers should analyze things for ethics. And if somebody's like, hey, you need to, take your flamethrower and just burn down this village full of children and people, and like, hey, wait a minute, why? Like being encouraging people to stand up for that is good, but then the system is built in such a way that standing up for that could mean your head. Like,
Now, I suppose having that on the books allows them to forego, like an actual, like crazy order, like you're saying, like, yeah, just go burn this village down with all these kids in it or whatever.
yeah.
And you refuse that. Well, that's good. That's what they wrote that down for. And that's a very good thing just across the board, but you still might, get kicked out of the military, right?
Yeah, and
And
consequences, like you could be shot by your superior officer too. Your commanding officer might kill you because insubordination and all that.
well, I don't know that they have. I mean, they would then be kicked out for.
Well,
that's definitely not like the rule of law.
No, but things like that do happen, and even just the implication that it could happen might cause people to make different decisions. Vietnam is one of those times where stuff like that happened all the time. And maybe
that could have been due to the draft, though, because the one thing I will say is I think the military does instill in its officers and its enlisted that you don't really rule effectively with fear. And I think they build more of a rapport of, respect and stuff like that. So,
yeah,
I don't think there would ever be a situation where a commanding officer would just lose his head and like shoot somebody for not following orders, because then he'd be ruling by fear.
Well, at least not now. Probably. I mean, given the current situation now, if things were different, if we, I don't know, had a hot war with China or Russia, maybe all that stuff would resurface again, and it happens all the time. So just having something codified on the books doesn't necessarily make it like, oh yeah, well, it says right here I can do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't matter when you're in battle, like in combat. But man, I think the military is one thing, but I'm thinking just in general about like obedience, deferring to authority, like, oh, you told me what to do, so I should just do it without question, even if I question it and I have reasons.
Well, I mean, you lead by example, right? So,
well, that's the hope. Yeah.
So our government, we we vote someone in and then they're like, no, we're going to take this person instead. And then, like, or we vote somebody in and they're like, I'm not really going to do what I said I would do. So, like, basically they aren't obeying us as they're supposed to. So that kind of sets this whole standard for like, well, why should we obey you?
Oh, that's a good point, that it does set a precedent that like, yeah, you made promises and now they're hollow. Like, you didn't follow through with anything. So yeah, man. Well,
sometimes it's just so simple.
When has a politician ever kept a promise, like in a concrete way? I would challenge people to point out one example. Okay, maybe Kennedy with the moon landing. Like, we're going to go to the moon by the end of the decade. Well, that happened. I mean, depending on what you believe. Well, but really close to it, even if you don't believe it. Like, that at some point, people landed on the moon. Anyway,
and now we have a space force.
Actually, that would be a really good thing to talk about, because I actually think there's a lot of merit to the Space Force. It makes a lot of sense, even though it's kind of a joke. It's a memeable sort of thing.
It was an existing branch of the Air Force that they carved out and moved to one side and gave them different uniforms and called them Space Force. So it sounds like Star Trek or something.
Yeah. And that really is the unfortunate thing, is the name. Like, It sounds really Space Marine-y, like, you're the Space Force. Pick up your fucking blaster rifle, your pulse rifle, and go to war. No, they're sitting behind computers, like, looking at trajectories of stuff in space and things, and that is actually really important. That is kind of the future. We do need a separate branch at this point. You've got the Navy, which is the water. You've got the Army, which is the land, presumably. You got the Marines, which is the water and the land, and you've got the Air Force, which is the air. Well, we're in space now, so why not have the Space Force? Nobody says, well, the Air Force, that sounds ridiculous. Like, but I mean, it serves a valuable role, although I think most military stuff doesn't need to exist. But that's all going down a whole different direction that we don't need to go down right now.
Yeah, and I mean, the Air Force was carved out of the Army to begin with, so. Mm-hmm. And then, out of the Space Force at some point, we'll probably have the Time Force and
the Time
Force. And
the Time Force. Hell yeah. Time Cop. I need like a laser eye on my eye or something like that.
They'll just have like a patch on their arm with like a theremin. It's like,
oh man. Well,
what were we talking about? Oh,
obedience. Like, I mean, I think I want to kind of like discuss this whole idea of deferring to authority. What makes somebody an authority and why you should defer to them in the first place. And because that's kind of what obedience is built around, like your parents, right? Oh yeah. Well, this guy right here stuck his cock inside your mom and inseminated her, and then her egg grew and turned into you, and boof, you came out, and now all of a sudden these two people are your gods. Like,
well, okay, so like merit, experience, education, things like that, like, for a lion's share of childhood, yeah, you really should be obeying your parents, for the most part, because they're going to be like, hey, if you touch that, you're going to die, or, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. The not every parent knows all the stuff, but in general, your elders do know more. They have more experience with the world than you do. So it's good to listen to them. Like, hey, don't run out into the street. Don't touch that hot burner. Don't stick a fork in the outlet, stuff like that. Because it is actually for your safety.
And that never really ends. I mean, like you see that in current events right now. Like there's a lot of people ignoring authority at the I'm forgetting the word, but like their safety is taking a back seat to their like immaturity. They're just like rebelling for the sake of rebelling. And
in what context, I guess, current event context.
Oh, like, well, if I say it, there's going to be the little banner across the bottom. So I think you know what I mean, right?
Oh, the mysterious virus of unspecified origin. That particular one. Yeah. And now, I mean, we are talking about people who theoretically are adults, so they should at least have like a little bit of understanding and should be able to make their own decisions. I mean, I guess I don't know at what point you are one of the people expected to obey, like where the delineation is between the obeyers and those handing down decrees or dictates. That like it's kind of tough. Well,
that's why I was saying things like merit or education or experience. You tend to defer to the people that know what they're talking about. I mean, like,
yeah. Well, and maybe people, and this does go back to this whole blind obedience thing. Like, I don't care how many letters you have as a suffix to your name. It doesn't matter to me. Like, it's about what you're saying. Like, do you have a convincing argument? Do you make sense? Like some logic or something. I wouldn't necessarily obey somebody simply because somebody says they're somebody.
Well, here's the thing though, because while I'm a big fan of logic, there is that whole fallacy of, I can't recall what it's called off the top of my head, but if you, I think it's a form of ad hominem actually. If you say, oh, you argued that poorly, well, it doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they suck at arguing.
Okay, you're 100% correct on that, and that's where I guess being like approaching things from a neutral standpoint. But then again, well, there's been multiple generations, at least in the U.S. here, of rebels, like people who rebel against the system simply because it's the system, and I think that persists today. And not without justification. There have been some pretty heinous things the U.S. government has done to its own people and to other people. And I don't fault the citizens for feeling a little bit, or I guess being skeptical, like hyper skeptical of such a system. It doesn't have a good track record. So, but then again, I don't know. It's
well, what about like on a smaller level, like instead of going all the way to the government, what about like in a work environment? Because I think that expectation, that culture of blind obedience still exists very much in a lot of corporate infrastructure.
It definitely does. And that
middle management.
Oh yeah, because you're a manager, all of a sudden you're large and in charge. Like, who are you? Or even a CEO? Like, I don't care. I have dealt with CEOs a lot, like multi-billion-dollar companies, like face-to-face discussions with CEOs, and I treat them like anybody else. Like, I don't see them as celebrities. In fact, I don't even see celebrities as celebrities. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, just hey, let's have a regular conversation. And the thing is, like, somebody on the news that I don't know. Okay, they state their credentials, but like that doesn't mean anything. Like you, Casey, if you yourself as a biologist told me some kind of biology related thing about the mysterious virus of unspecified origin, then I'd be inclined to you would have a lot more weight behind what you say to me than somebody on some screen 1,000 miles away in some studio.
I mean, while I appreciate that, I don't know that that's necessarily like the most prudent way to weigh your allegiances when it comes to.
I have no allegiances, for one.
Well, that's the wrong word, but I know
what you're saying.
I'm not. The thing I'm trying to say is, like, I have a bachelor's degree and like 6 years of experience in biology, whereas like Fauci's got like 36 years in that particular job. Not to mention, like, I think he's a PhD maybe, or he's definitely more educated than I am, and like a freaking expert in virology.
That's true. Like, I'm not saying I wouldn't give, say, like Fauci no weight at all. Like, of course, like I'm going to take that into consideration. But I know you, and I know you not to be a bullshitter. Like, personally, we've known each other for decades now. So if you say something wholeheartedly, like, it's gonna, like, it'll have a lot more weight behind it. And man,
unless we're in court.
Yeah, again, I have no idea who this guy is. I've never met him. We had coffee once, that one time, and we were roommates for a minute. Yeah,
that's like a Trump didn't know someone.
Exactly.
I never met this guy except the time I was on his private island, and the time we fucked some small girls. Wait, what?
Oh, yeah. By the way, Epstein didn't kill himself. Ghislaine Maxwell, the trial is going to be shoveled under the rug. They're not going to talk about it. They're not going to name any names. Just mark my words on that. Just an aside there, a little bit.
She's already in prison, right?
Yes, for now. And there's a trial that I think has concluded in secret.
Like, she got found guilty on like all but one charge, and she's like already doing time in prison. I'm surprised she's not dead yet.
So am I. And of course, you'll note that the media is only talking about Jeffrey Epstein's interactions entirely, and not, that massive list of all the guests to the island that includes like all of the people like at the top. Yeah. Basically everybody has been there. They're not going to talk about that, but
that's an interesting, actually, kind of an interesting angle, is the ones that we're supposed to obey seem to get away with not obeying the laws of society, or they get a pass on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, okay, that's actually a really good point, and that goes to like the thing that I hate the most: hypocrisy, a double standard. Like, how can you expect me to follow your rules if you don't follow them yourself? Like, fuck you. I don't care about your rules. Like, no, homie, don't play that. I'm done. And I think you said earlier, lead by example. If if the people who are passing down these decrees and expecting everybody else to fall in line, if they don't follow their own rules, well, why should we?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's not to say that all the rules are bad rules. Like, sure, there could be rules that are like legit, like, hey, don't build your house out of matches. That's a bad idea. Okay, well, yeah, that's a really dumb idea. So we shouldn't necessarily dismiss everything. But I think being skeptical is really important, especially if there's hypocrisy involved. Especially if somebody is telling you to do one thing and they themselves don't do it. That's where I'm like, nah, you're on shaky ground, buddy.
Like, what about taking a harder look at things that people just don't seem to want to obey kind of across the board?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are there so many people seeking prostitutes or buying drugs on the streets? Well, maybe they shouldn't be against the law.
That's a really good point. Like, what is the threshold where
compare those to like murders? Like, there just aren't that many murders compared to people wanting to get high
or have sex.
Yeah.
Pay for sex or something.
People would rather feel good than make someone else feel bad, even if they're a psycho.
No, you're right. And that's a good point. What is the threshold from where things are like morally or ethically wrong to the point where it's just like something on paper, which is right, like, because I think like prostitution and drug use is like a paper crime. It's just on the books. Somebody doesn't like it, and they pass a law, right? And so now it's wrong, quote unquote. So do we obey that? Is that more like which are they equally weighted, or are there things that are weighted more heavily than others? It's a tough call. Like, man, oh geez, there's so many angles going on here.
I think
more beer.
The issue of blind obedience probably applies again because, like, that's one of those situations where it's like, if you examine the law for yourself and come to the conclusion that you and I have that it's stupid, well, there is no reason to obey it. Like,
yeah,
you'll have to try hard not to get caught because it's still like wrong in the eyes of the law.
Yeah.
But like, just fucking do it because it shouldn't be illegal.
Well, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, what is the threshold? How many people disobeying the rules does it take for a rule to be invalidated? Does it require a certain percentage, or
I don't
what?
think there's any such number or precedent on the books anywhere.
No, but the government is more than happy to spend our tax dollars to propagandize everybody to believe that we have to obey these things or else.
Maybe it should be. Maybe that should actually be kind of like an overflow valve of sorts for the law. Like, if X amount of people are committing, a particular crime, that law should be evaluated as to whether or not it's actually like applying to a real crime.
Well, it actually makes sense because at least in the US, this country is built around the premise that the people, the politicians that we elect are representatives, and they're supposed to represent us. And we build our own structure and our own future, not the other way around. Like, they don't decide for us. They're our servants, not the other way around. So yeah, like, if enough people don't like a rule, or if things have changed in a certain way societally or whatever. I mean, actually a good example would be gay marriage. Like it finally came around that was okayed because society by and large was okay with it. Drug legalization is kind of coming along. I think prostitution will be hot on its heels. But that's the thing. Like,
it's not just being okay with it though, because I have a feeling that most of the country was okay with it for a very long time before it got there. Like somebody had to get loud.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It actually, but that does kind of speak to the problem of the system, is that these people, who the politicians that are sitting up there on the ivory tower, they're essentially dictating. And sorry, my phone was like getting all crazy over there. But what was I saying? Oh, it isn't a matter. So from a political standpoint, it's not a matter of asking the constituents like, hey, what would you like? What changes do you want to see? How can we build this together? No, it's like somebody whispers sweet nothings into the constituents' ears to get elected. They get enough check boxes, and then boom, now they're there, and then they make decisions for the rest of us. Like, that's not how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be that way. Yeah. Oh, geez. And now my cat's going crazy.
People just obey money.
Well, yeah, that's a huge issue. I'm hoping crypto is going to fix that shit.
You don't fix greed with different currency.
Oh, you're not going to fix that. That's not the goal. The goal is to fix the centralization of monetization. Because, well, who controls it? Whoever controls the money controls the people. But anyway, that's a whole. Well, I think actually it all kind of like connects. I really think it does. Mm-hmm. I mean, we might have had a few
things
too many
like
beers.
Lobbying, though. Like,
oh my God, don't get me started on lobbying.
I thought that's where you were going. Like, like whispering in someone's ear, slipping them a.
Well, no, that is part money. Of it. But lobbying certainly is very akin to that. I'm talking about like just elections. Like you make bedroom promises to the people, and they check a checkbox for you, and then you quickly do whatever the hell you want to do. That's exactly what happens over and over. It's kind of like the puppy dog syndrome, like abusive relationships. You get abused, you get beat by your partner, and you keep coming back for more. Like, please, master, can I have another? Like, at what point do you say, fuck it, I've had enough? Like, where is the point where people stand up for themselves and just walk away from that shit?
Yeah. Well, and it's the same with corporations. Like, you're all obeying the board of directors, like 11 out of 12 of which aren't even in your freaking like industry. They're just
no, you're right. Like at least as far as the people at the top, like the executives in the corporation, they are beholden to the shareholders, and the shareholders are like, we want the shares to go up, we want more profit, and
yeah, well,
they kind of
it's gambling, so and sometimes you don't get what you want.
Well, that's true. And that's a bad thing too. And there's propaganda in that regard as well, where people, it does come down to propaganda, where people are led to believe that things are a certain way, and if you just do these, 5 tricks, your life is going to be good, like life hacks and stuff. Like, no, it's all bogus. It's bullshit. The universe is a harsh mistress. Are
we getting back into the subs and doms thing?
Well, probably, but we probably shouldn't, because that'd be a whole different episode. Oh man,
I ever since I was a kid, I've had a strong aversion to authority and blind obedience. It's like it was just like a natural instinct. And I don't know if everyone has that natural instinct, but I don't know where it came from. So I would think it's got to be pretty primal.
Yeah, I think it is. Now that is one of the things, is the system. We'll call it the system. Is inclined to condition everybody to fall in line, to follow the rules. Be a good citizen, be patriotic, America, fuck yeah, that kind of thing. And they propagandize about that all the time and create this us versus them sort of, like there's these teams, the red team and the blue team, and they're fighting each other. Like, that serves their purposes, not ours. That's exactly how they maintain control. And it, oh man, shit, I'm feeling like I'm gonna start going down a path, but it's not a humanitarian thing and has nothing to do with doing the best for, like, serving everybody's interests. Like, man,
well, I mean, if yeah, I don't disagree. If we're talking in terms of like the government, like things have gotten so corrupt, and even most large corporations, like I think it just becomes too big, too bloated, and loses sight of the grand scheme of things, and just,
or the original vision. And honestly, looking at it through my lens, I don't see a difference between big corporations and big government. They're one and the same.
They are, yeah.
Like, they're in bed together and they are ruling everything and telling us what to do for their own best interest.
Yeah. And if you can see that happening, like, obviously the right choice is to remove that authority figure, but
or opt out. Like, you remove the authority figure, you don't remove the cancer. Like, the system still exists. You have to walk away from it, honestly. Like, just like dismissal is the best weapon in this war, if it is a war. I guess it's a ideological or philosophical war, or as Alex Jones would say, it's an info war. I mean, but there's a point there. I mean,
yeah. So I guess obedience is probably like a judgment call. It's just not everyone has great judgment either. So,
well, no, and maybe obedience. Okay, so the way I look at it, if you're coming from a standpoint of total ignorance, right? Like, I've never been parachuting, okay? Never skydive, jumped out of a plane with a parachute. If there's somebody that I'm like a skydive person that I'm diving with through the sky, and they've been doing it for decades, and they tell me, like, passionately, like, you got to pull this thing. Well, I'm gonna fucking pull it because I don't know what's going on. Like, clearly they know something I don't, and I'm falling to the earth thousands of feet above the earth. Yeah. Oh yeah, hell yeah, I'm gonna pull that. But things aren't that dire when it comes to politics or other such situations. And I think there's a lot of people who proclaim to have the answers who don't. Well, track records. You could just look at, like I said, when has any politician done one thing that they said they would do? Like, well, it's pretty rare.
Politics have never been about being an expert in any one thing. Politics are the person who went skydiving for the first time and listened to the guy that told them to pull the cord. And then they're telling you, hey, you got to pull a cord when you jump out of a plane. Parachute go. And then everyone else being like, well, you're not an expert. I'm not going to pull the cord. That's kind of what I see happening. It's like, you don't have to be an expert to pass on the knowledge of what somebody else learned from an expert. Like, it doesn't have to get so dilute.
No, that's true, but I don't think these people, the thing is, it's a very different thing when you're jumping out of an airplane with parachutes on your back, and the whole point is to get down to the ground safely, versus the political system. The political system makes all kinds of proclamations and all kinds of promises, and has never followed through once with it. Like, I can sit and watch the parachutist, I guess, if that's a word, jump out of planes over and over again. I'd be like, oh yeah, every single time they landed safely. They brought the people back safely. Politicians, on the other hand, have maybe a 0.5% success rate at what they say they're going to do. Like, okay, putting that into the terms of parachuting, imagine if the same success rate were applied to parachuting. A skydiving institution that's like, oh yeah, we have a 0.5% success rate of landing safely. Hey, come fly with us. Would you fly with that team? Like, fuck, I would not. No way. No. And that's exactly what politics is. Over and over and over again. It makes the same promises that it's going to make everything better. It's going to do, well, we're going to make, and it doesn't matter, D's or R's, or red team, blue team, green team, whatever, you name it. They all say the same shit, and it's all bullshit. Like, it never comes to pass. They never fulfill their promises, ever.
I mean, that's not really their fault, other than the fact that they shouldn't be making those promises in the first place, because it has to go through a bunch of other people. So
no, you are correct that the system is bigger than politics, than the people that we know.
Yeah,
but
so
that
it's
is
not like they mean to be ineffective. It's just that the system is fucked up.
Well, yes, it is. And that might be a fault for the voters and the votees, that the people wanting the votes are just playing to the way the system works, and the people casting votes are assuming the system does actually work. And over and over again, they're betrayed, and they blame whoever, you name it. It's exactly how Hitler came to power, by the way. I don't want to defer to that, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get too political, because we always do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either.
I mean, there isn't that much. Like, if we're being realistic, there isn't that much obedience in your everyday life between the constituents and the government. Like, it's not. There's no like middle management that's like nitpicking every single thing you do. Like you'll get that in corporate. Like, I saw an article about some place that wanted, I think maybe it was Starbucks. They wanted everybody to clock out to take a shit, and like that's like real micromanagement right there. Like,
Yeah, it is. And
that's getting into everything about like.
You'll get the same kind of thing. Well, you won't get exactly the same thing, but you'll get similar things between corporate and government organizations. And they're both bullshit, honestly. Like, it's totally bullshit. The idea of like deferring to authority, obeying the rules simply because they're rules on some chart and there's consequences if you disobey, like, that is a huge problem.
I mean, what if there was a corporation where you get your employee handbook and it's just a sheet of paper and it says, do your job, don't be a dick. Like,
I would like that. Like,
that's kind of all you need, right?
If I ran a corporation, that's exactly what it would be. That's what I would do. And, you know, the same goes for government. Do your job, don't be a dick. Hey, perfect. Like, oh man.
Yeah. I guess that's all it takes. We've solved the problem of blind obedience by just saying, keep your head down, do your job, and don't be a dick.
Well, yeah. I think that's pretty fair. The thing is, like, a lot of these things feel very religious. Like, you're
we didn't even really talk about religion.
No, and that kind of is kind of what I want to get into, and I want to segue from politics and corporations, the corporate life, into religion, because I think they're all kind of in the same vein. Like,
well, that's the dumbest one of all, in my opinion, because you're being told by some invisible force that you can't even see, which was really just a bunch of misogynistic dudes from thousands of years ago.
Well, it doesn't matter what the situation is. The problem with religious institutions is the fact that you can't prove if they ponied up the promised like trophy, I guess, that like, it's the afterlife. Like, you don't know if somebody went to heaven or hell or oblivion. Like, where's the proof? You don't have that. I mean, at least with government and the corporate world, you can like see some evidence.
Yeah.
But you can't with religion. Like, how do you know your soul was saved?
That's the hard line, isn't it? Like, obedience is all about controlling with fear.
Yeah.
Now, that can be a good thing. Like, like I mentioned earlier, hey, if you touch that, it'll like kill you or burn you or something. Like, that is technically controlling somebody's behavior with fear. But it's justified because that fear is real. Like, if they touch that, they will get burned, right? So we learn at a young age, oh, we need to follow that, because if we don't, and we usually learn that the hard way, we'll actually get burned or killed or whatever. You don't really learn from that. But
I should share my soldering iron story where I picked the wrong end up and melted my hand. Oh my God, that was the worst summer ever.
But you translate that to this, it's almost like that type 1 and type 2 error I've talked about before, but you have to be able to figure out like where the fear is justifiable or plausible or applicable even, in whether or not you obey something, like,
yeah.
Because with religion, the fear that they're instilling upon you is very grandiose and pretty much probably realistically not real at all.
Well, and you're right. It's an intangible punishment or consequence for your actions. You can't like, and that's the problem I have with
very
the
real
religious
effects.
side is like you can't test that. You can't. There's no evidence for that. Like, because how do you know you went to hell? Okay, show me one person in hell, and I might change my mind.
Well, see, there's people with those near-death experiences, though, that come back and say they've seen hell or they've seen heaven. And that's proof enough for people.
But that doesn't necessarily. Okay, I'll yes, that is very fascinating, but that doesn't prove the point of the people telling you that you have to obey them, that they're the ones who are the authority and their decrees are the ones you have to follow. That's the problem I have with that. And I have the same problem with corporations or governments. Like, it doesn't matter. All of them are bullshit. All of them are bullshitting you nearly all the time for their own benefit. And all you have to do, just using the example of government, right? Like, do as I say, not as I do. That's a common thing. There are a bunch of people who tell all of us, the people, what to do, and then they do the entirely the opposite. They, oh, hey, prostitution's wrong. But then they're like hiring prostitutes like all day long. Oh, drug use is wrong. And they're fucking snorting coke all the time while they're in Congress. Like money laundering, that's wrong. Insider trading, that's wrong. Oh, we're totally insider trading.
Oh, the Catholic Church with like the pedophilia and
yeah, exactly. Like, how are you an authority at that point? I honestly, my faith is destroyed for all of those institutions.
And did you hear that in kind of a current event thing, the Pope was like, oh, you're just selfish if you have a pet. Like, you should be out having kids. Like, coming from a dude with like no kids and
oh my God.
That's hypocrisy.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said at the beginning, leaders lead by example. You be the change you want to see in the world. If you can't show me how to live, I'm not going to live like you want me to live. And there's no reason I should. Like, why? Why should I follow what you say unless you're doing it yourself? Like that. Politicians, you want to go to war? Fine, go to war, but lead the charge. Hop on your horse, pick up your rifle, and go like straight onto the front lines yourself. If you do that, I might be inclined to feel that like you at least believe in what you're saying. But if you're just sitting there in the White House or wherever in the Pentagon and just like, well, I don't know, send those 19-year-olds off to like shoot and be shot by a bunch of people they've never met for reasons, well, we can't even really explain. No, fuck you. Fuck you. I won't do what you tell me.
Now, when it comes to like the Pope, though, like those guys are pretty hard Bible thumpers usually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they do kind of follow, they practice what they preach.
Oh no, you're right. There is kind of a pretty solid system for picking the Pope.
Yeah, and it's like, so maybe like leading by example isn't always right either, because they might be just as brainwashed, if not more, to be doing exactly what they shouldn't be doing. No, and then you just turn into lemmings.
That's true. I mean, no, by leading by example, I don't necessarily mean you should always be the one leading the charge into battle for whatever cause you want to fight for. And that could be a metaphysical cause too. But at least having something on the books, like your experience that like, hey, you're an authority because of X, Y, and Z, right? Like these things are the things that prove that you're more than just the average person. That has a little bit more weight in my mind. But just garnering more votes, that's easy. That hell, I could get voted into Congress. I should do that just for fun.
I don't know. I guess outside of like Christianity, there's, like Buddhism or, the Hinduism sort of philosophies, paganism, things like that, where like, practicing what you preach is actually very peaceful and, like self-centric, like you're only focused on what you do and your own self-discipline, and you're not bothering anybody else. And it's like, I'm fine with that stuff. That's why I don't pick on it,
Oh yeah. Like any like spiritual,
there's nothing to obey except yourself.
Exactly. It's about self-improvement. And that's a nice thing about paganism, neo-paganism, and Wicca and stuff like that. It's self-improvement. It's an introspective kind of philosophy. Yeah. You're not telling other people what to believe. You're not telling other people that if they don't believe what you do, that they're doing something wrong and, they should be punished for some reason. I'm okay. Like anything that is a standalone thing like that is perfectly fine in my book. Like, knock yourself out. Whatever you want to do, just don't tell me what to do.
It's funny that the religions that people get self-fulfillment from, like true self-fulfillment, might tout the religion with, like the way you would like, I really enjoyed this movie. You might like it too, but you aren't like force feeding it to them. You aren't like, I'm going to come over Friday night and I'm going to tape your eyelids open and we're going to watch this movie because I really enjoyed the movie. I did. I really, really enjoyed it. You need to believe that I enjoyed it. It's like,
do we have to pop in Clockwork Orange, that one scene?
Like, I feel like that's what most of the Abrahamic religions are like. It's like people say they're getting fulfilled because I think they're scared to not give that vibe off because they might go to hell if they don't.
Yeah, like, and that does kind of speak to a lot of the obedience kind of things where people
it's all
do
about
things.
Obedience. There's no self-reflection in those religions whatsoever.
But it's bigger than that. Like it speaks to a lot of obedience where people are afraid.
God does everything. Ask God, he'll do it. You don't have to do shit. You just, everything that you do was actually God. Everything that you fuck up on was the devil. Like,
well, and
none of it is you. None of it.
Well, and I'm just going to throw this out there. The same actually, in a convoluted way, applies to politics and corporatism. The exact same things apply. Like we think we're evolved, but we really aren't that evolved. Like we're doing the same shit, just with a different mask. Holy shit, man. Damn. More beer.
Well, that might be a pretty good spot to wrap up on. That was a pretty climactic sort of place to wind up. I don't know.
I think so. Yeah.
Having trouble finding words now.
I am too. There's so many thoughts, and now I'm going to the DDLG territory. Oh wait, we didn't really talk about that. So, what kind of?
Is that a Dom sub thing?
Yeah, it is. Daddy Dom, little girl.
Oh,
yeah. It's more popular than most people realize. Anyway, or yeah. I think you're right that we should wrap things up. I think we've covered most of the stuff, but it's something like keep the conversation going down there in the comment section, even if you want to talk about like doms and subs and stuff. Like, go ahead.
Tell us about an order you followed that really fucked everything up. Or maybe something that you didn't want to do, but you listened and it actually like really helped you, both sides of the coin, like, cause it's, there are legit reasons to obey and there are legit reasons to resist.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Huh. Yeah, I'd like to hear people's comments, stories. I am a huge story person, so tell me your stories. I love it. I love storytelling. Yeah, so those who are still with us in the end, thanks for sticking it out with us. Thanks for deep sink diving into obedience and religion and corporatism and government and everything in between.
Listen to the song, Obey!